going. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me for YIC Mentor Webinar Session 37. Let me move over to our agenda. There we go. So as usual, I will take care of our welcome, mindfulness, and introduction of presenters. And I'm Amanda Charlesworth with the Utah State Board of Education, a YIC program specialist. And after that, we will hear about TAL workers, why, what, and who, with Jennifer Red, Rachel Trane, and Cadon Sagendorf from the Department of Health and Human Services. After that presentation, we will learn about the Utah Parent Center and have a quick Special Ed 101 with Melissa Teemant from the Utah Parent Center. All right, and as usual, we'll start with our mindfulness. So I just have a quick reminder that we always want to live in the present. And this is one of my favorite quick graphics that's a reminder to me that when I'm doing things, I should be focused on what is actually happening in the moment, not concerned about the past or the future, and stressed about other activities. And this is one of the other reasons that our furry friends are some of my favorite friends, because they are so good at being in the now. The article I read recently talked about how mindfulness is one of the most common words in popular and clinical psychology currently. And all sorts of methods have attached themselves to the simple notion, but for good reason. There's increasing research that is supporting the benefits of mindfulness, such as resistance to depression and anxiety, lower severe illness, and greater longevity. But what does mindfulness actually mean? And how does someone do things mindfully? So the article I read suggested that it's like many healthy behaviors, like exercising, healthy eating, quitting smoking, things of this nature. While it sounds simple, it's not easy. In essence, mindfulness is a psychological process of purposefully being in bringing one's attention to experiences occurring in the present moment without judgment. In other words, connecting with immediacy of one's experience and not attaching any particular significance or importance to whatever might be happening. So, of course, this is a challenge, especially since all of us, our brains were wired a little differently, and we're learning to reset and stay focused in the present. But I always encourage you to take on the practice, give yourself the moment, take the 3 deep breaths or whatever practice works for you. All right, now I would like to introduce our presenters. Oh, talked over my slide as I usually do. All right, so first I have Jennifer Red, and she has been working with the Division of Child and Family Services for about 5 years. In addition to her work at DCFS as a licensed clinical social worker, she is a licensed clinical social worker with years of experience working with children and families with trauma histories, fetal exposure to illicit substances, fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, and other behavioral issues. Jennifer has worked within the educational system as an educational interventionist, a dropout prevention specialist, and she's a strong advocate for foster kids and kinship placement. Previous to her employment with DCFS, she was a foster parent from 2006 to 2019 and has provided kinship care as needed through the present. With this lived experience, she understands many struggles and that kinship and foster care youth face in striving towards permanency and independence. Jennifer is appreciative of the opportunity to present to educators, prevention specialists, mentors, and all others helping Utah's children navigate their journey. With Jennifer, we will have Rachel Trane, and Rachel is the new TAL Lived Experience Coordinator. Rachel lived in DCFS's care for about 11 years with different placement levels and types of care. After being released from care, she has used her experience as a foster youth to empower her future and gain self-love. Rachel feels that every child needs to believe in themselves and have the understanding that they can do or be anything they set their mind to, as she has a firm belief that as child welfare workers, we can help youth gain this knowledge by showing our belief in them. Since exiting foster care, Rachel has obtained a bachelor's of psychology with a double minor in family life, human development, and sociology. She also has a license in massage therapy. Her biggest accomplishment to date was her TED Talk, Rachel has a goal to be a public speaker in the future. She is passionate about helping our youth succeed during and after foster care. Rachel loves the outdoors, spending time with friends, taking naps, and working out. With Jennifer and Rachel, we will have Cadon Sagendorf. He is currently the Youth Advisory Council President for the Division of Child and Family Services. He is a strong voice for advocacy for youth issues related to successful transitioning to adulthood. Cadon works for a nonprofit organization, Angels Landing, as the Community Outreach Coordinator. Angels Landing provides support to young adults who have aged out of the foster care system, and Cadon is currently pursuing a degree in psychology from Utah Tech University. His extensive involvement in local and national advocacy aims to improve and inform the child welfare system through the power of lived experience. All right, after we hear from the DHHS group, we will hear from Melissa Teemant with the Utah Parent Center, and she has been working there since 2021, but has taken advantage of their services for the last 12 years. She has a 20-year-old son with a learning disability who receives special education services. Melissa also has 2 other adult children and one who's ready to graduate. She enjoys helping other parents of kids with disabilities feel hope and find answers to their questions. She was originally attracted to the position because of the youth in custody role, and she has loved getting to know others working with YIC. She loves trying new foods, being active, especially outdoors, gardening, laughing, and watching panda videos. All right, so let me just switch our PowerPoints real quick. And as I am doing that, Rachel, and Jennifer and Cadon, if you guys are getting ready to take over. All right, one more screen share and we should be good here for a moment. All right, friends, you're welcome to unmute and take it away.
All right, thank you, Amanda. So today we are coming to you with a little bit of a different, maybe it's not different, I don't know, but a little bit different viewpoint in that we all 3 have lived experience from different pieces of working for the agency, being in the Youth Advisory Council, but also our journeys with foster care as well. And so we're just going to take a stab at it. We're going to try to save some time for questions at the end as well. So any questions you have, write them down. I'm pretty open to, if you have a question in the moment, just unmuting or whatever you need to chime in. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so some of the things that we're really starting to see in learning, in the learning environment, are that we have a better understanding to now. I don't know that we're starting to see them. I think we've seen them for a long time, but we're gaining a better understanding, is really the impact of trauma on the developing brain. And so something that we have, and I'll get into this in future slides, but we have a better understanding of what trauma really does to the developing brain, how that's impacting school with trauma and neglect specifically, as we see youth that are maybe 15 years old and they're functioning in multiple areas of their lives at about 8 years old or 9 years old or 10 years old. That looks a little bit different sometimes in the classroom. Some of those students are quiet. They seem very respectful, but really they're staying quiet because they have missing information, or they have pieces that they're not really understanding, so they're just really quiet. So some of those youth stay off the radar of everyone because they're not getting into trouble. We see youth also when they're functioning at this lower level. Sometimes we see violence, or we see the class clown, or we see, just what looks like really blatant disrespect, and we don't always have a great understanding for that. And so I'm looking at, when you're in high school, if you're acting like an 8-year-old, and you're one of the youth that's not silent, typically you're going to be very misunderstood. You're going to look like a youth that's acting out. And sometimes people are wondering why. So the impacts of trauma on brain development really are significant for those first early years of life. In the early years of life, that's when nurturing typically takes place for a lot of our youth that we have in care. Nurturing has been disrupted by disruptions in caregivers, sometimes neglect or just a lack of receiving proper care. This can happen for a multitude of reasons. So, we like to think of causation a lot of times as drug use and things like that take parents kind of away from children. This can also happen in parents that are depressed. It can happen in parents that work 3 jobs to put food on the table and the child's in a busy daycare. And so we need to be really open-minded to really those first early years of life and how they're impacting brain development throughout all of adolescence. The good news is when there's not actual brain damage, then kids can catch up. And so we may have this 15-year-old that's acting closer to a 7 or 8-year-old in some areas. They may be acting like a 20-year-old in other areas. They can have the opportunities to catch up if we can take the time to really try and dive deep and figure out where they're missing information, where the gaps are. Trauma in the brain is not something that gets stuck like we see in actual brain damage. Children who have been neglected have a harder time with this catching up. Neglect is an extremely difficult thing really for kids to grow from because they do have a lot of missing information, things that come very normal to those of us that didn't face neglect. As far as just how the environment works, socialization skills, what's expected in behaviors, being able to take social cues and physical cues from others that are nonverbal. Those are some of the things that we see children that have faced neglect. They have a very high lack of being able to read other people. They don't read facial expressions. They have a lot of missing information. And so in a school setting, oftentimes we'll see maybe they're reading something and then you're supposed to summarize the paragraph, or you read a paragraph and you put, how does this apply to another situation, or how does this apply to you? We see those youth struggling a lot with being able to apply things across settings because they've never had the normalization of social skills or cues that come into those areas. And so with that, those youth have literal missing information. They don't know how to relate things into their personal life because they can't tell the whole story from a paragraph. And so they have missing pieces that they can't pick up on. And so oftentimes with children that are facing neglect, we see them as some of our hardest kids to really understand their brain and their learning styles, because it's really difficult to tell when a child's missing information, where they're missing that information, and then see them in a different setting where they function really high. And so we see highs and lows with neglect as well due to missing information. And then fetal exposure is another big challenge in learning. And so with fetal exposure, we have a lot of research really on fetal alcohol. We have books to help us understand fetal alcohol. It's still very difficult to have a proper diagnosis because the fetal alcohol spectrum disorder can be so different from one youth to another. But there's a lot of study for years and years, and there's a lot of strategies to try and understand how to communicate and how to work well with a youth that has fetal alcohol. We have resources as well in that arena from lived experience, youth and adults who are now writing books and trying to teach people how a fetal alcohol brain works. Where we're struggling now is really 20 years ago, there was this thought that alcohol was really the only great impact on a developing baby. And so there wasn't a lot of information on how marijuana, opioids, and other substances really impacted that child. There was a little bit on smoking while you were pregnant, but it was mostly physical impairments that we were noting, such as low birth weight, sometimes a little bit of eating struggles in the beginning, but they didn't think that there was long-term impact for most other substances other than alcohol. Because of that, the studies on other substances, really, it's not as in-depth as fetal alcohol. I have put in 2 resources at the end. There are 2 articles specific to opioid usage. And if you're very interested in really learning about opioids in the developing brain, in those articles, they're both free on the web. In those articles, there are links to other articles in their sources cited. You'll learn more about that, but you have to follow the links because unlike alcohol, we don't have a lot of great resources like put together all in one spot. So some different things that we see with potential opioid exposure and other illicit drugs is we see highs and lows. They're a little bit different than fetal alcohol. And so what we know as of now is in those highs and lows, we have an overdevelopment in our state brain. So that lower limbic system brain is an overdevelopment. So fight, flight, freeze is very much overdeveloped, and we have an underdevelopment or slower development happening in their thinking brain. And so what this creates is this creates really reactive youth. This creates a youth that gets stressed out, and they might you might see a youth that is like turning their desk over, they're throwing their desk, they're hitting people, they're yelling at people, and they are very, very slow to be able to bring back on board their prefrontal cortex and think through a situation. How that impacts school is that's where we're starting to see our highest behavioral youth, as we're seeing those patterns with that lower brain developed really heavy and very, very active and overactive. Their ability to think through things, to stop and think is very, very limited. This impacts youth as well in subjects where they have to problem solve. So things like science and math that are problem solving, they may have some deficits in. They're not deficits that are so low that we typically see like an IEP needed, but they have struggles in those areas. So you may have youth that are struggling more in a math or a science class, anything that's problem solving related. And then they're scoring really, really high in things like language arts or history. And so those struggles are very real. Just in kind of the problem solving areas of what we're seeing. If we can go to the next slide, please. So some of the things, what do we do about it, right? How can we help? And so a couple of things that I really wanted to talk about today is trust-based relational intervention. Trust-based relational intervention really takes and has three facets to it. The first one is connection. The second one is empowering. And the third one is correction. What we know with TBRI is that a lot of times we have it wrong. So if we really take that pyramid of needs, we want connection to be the bottom base foundation. Oftentimes, especially in settings where there's an expectation of behavior, we have it backwards, where we have that base setting as correction because we don't like to see youth misbehaving. And this is not just educators, this is parents, this is everyone. You're trying to keep that control in an environment where there's expectations. And so we jump straight to correction instead of connection. The middle portion of a pyramid would be empowering. And so empowering is an area that I feel like schools are getting it right. And we've seen a lot of things happen even since COVID that actually really helped this as well. So empowering is taking physiological needs. So this is the need for movement. This is a need for hydration, snacks, and things like that. And why I say schools getting it right is back in the day, even when I was a youth, we had recess in elementary school, right? We had a morning recess, we had lunch recess, we had afternoon recess. So we were getting up and moving at least every 2 hours. And that's what's recommended is we need to have movement every couple of hours for youth so that they can kind of get all those jitters out and be able to refocus. What really changed during COVID times is that we started having water bottles at youth's desks instead of going to the drinking fountain. The drinking fountain is a thing that kids would stop by the drinking fountain on their way out or on their way back in from recess. And they're not really drinking a lot of water. They're just super quick. They might just get one little gulp of water. What happened during COVID is we had water bottles placed at students' desks because drinking fountains weren't able to be used. And what research is really telling us about that right now is that youth are drinking more water. They're staying calmer in the classroom setting, and they're actually improving and learning. And so I think that's one area that I feel like schools get it right. We get movement every couple of hours. we drink water. Some settings are with snacks, some are not. I see a lot of IEPs that have snack time in there to help a child be able to function at their highest levels. And then we have school lunch breaks and things like that. And so we're seeing that really successful. The next thing that I'll jump into is occupational therapy. This is an area that's really, really difficult because when we think of occupational therapy, we're thinking of really of youth that are struggling greatly, that their disabilities are visible, right? And so we see a youth that struggles to write. We see a youth that struggles with functioning. We might see difficulties in gross motor skills and things like that. And we're like, all right, let's connect them with occupational therapy. Occupational therapy is a really big help for youth that I would call them invisible disabilities. Youth that we look at that may be struggling with fetal exposure or potentially high functioning autism, but it's not noticeable from day to day. Things like that. If we can get a youth into an occupational therapy assessment, what we're finding is that our youth are struggling with certain developmental areas, and those can be targeted specifically. And so a good occupational therapist is able to go in and do the testing and then target specific areas. The struggle with occupational therapy, though, is a very common struggle, is that it's not really able to be covered by health insurance for off-label. And so we can see occupational therapy with certain diagnoses, such as autism, sometimes fetal alcohol and things like that, but they have to have a specific diagnosis to be covered by insurance. And so that is one of the challenges with really getting youth the best services possible to help with their growth is insurance doesn't cover occupational therapy for off-label prescription. The same thing with applied behavioral analysis. So ABA therapy has been a really big thing in the autism communities for a long time. What we're finding with youth in care is that certain facets of ABA work really well with fetal alcohol, and they work really well with kids that are having those high trauma responses that we don't quite understand what's going on with their brain. There are certain pieces of ABA that need to be worked on, and I've heard that that's being worked on for youth with trauma. They don't respond really well to some of the corrections in ABA, but a lot of the other things that work with like rote memory and learning things that way work really well with our youth that are highly traumatized and have other issues that are not just autism. Again, ABA therapy, one of the big challenges with ABA is we can have it covered by health insurance and Medicaid if a youth has a diagnosis of autism, but it's not covered by health insurance and Medicaid for off-label prescriptions at this point in time. And so those are some things to really think about, because it's really difficult to refer a family to a service and then say, by the way, you're going to have to cash pay for this service. But as a person, as a mother of several children, I would rather know of the resource, even if I can't afford it, and try and find ways to solve it. And so I think these are things that are really helpful for us to know. I just realized with trust-based relational intervention, one of the pieces I wanted to talk about is like really where to get that resource. So I've talked with our post-adopt program administrator as well. Post-adopt, most of the supervisors in the state are TBRI practitioners, and they're holding TBRI trainings that are free to the community. They can hold TBRI trainings with school districts and in schools if needed. And so really with that intervention, if you have any questions of, hey, where do I find TBRI? How do I get it in my school? How do I get the training on this? You can reach out to me at any time and I'll connect you with someone that is likely to be able to help you get that training in your school. All right, next slide. Okay, I'm going to turn the time over to Rachel. And Rachel is going to give us a lot of education about transition to adult living that we call TAL. So if you ever hear the acronym TAL, that's what we're referring to.
So transition to adult living, sorry, is intended for the youth that are not being put into either a kinship or there's not a permanent placement, and so they're likely going to be aging out of the system. Our youth become available for TAL services at the age of 14, and typically services get cut off around the age of 23. So when you're in between there, we're really just developing skills to instill that confidence, still that like the understanding that they can find their own resources and et cetera, et cetera. So the way that we track our youth is through the NYTD, or the National Youth in Transition Database. Typically, we'll have the coordinators of each region reach out to all of our youth and just have them filling out a survey. Most of for the NYTD, those are targeted mostly towards the cohort. So I believe we just finished the 19 those are typically targeted for our 17, 19, and 21-year-olds. They're also incentivized. So after each of those cohorts go through and fill out all of those, the questionnaire, basically they end up getting a incentive for filling that out. I do believe right now we're on our 21-year-olds. Is that correct? I'm pretty sure that's where we're at. Just finishing up those. So yeah, so basically we just track to see where they're at and see what resources they need to, so we can do better for them and vice versa. So our TAL milestones, those actually start at age 14. Typically the questions that they'll have is, do you guys have a good support system as far as relationship building? Do you have an idea of where you want to go after you graduate high school? Now, granted, most of our 14, 15, and 16-year-olds aren't too stressed as stressed about finishing high school quite yet, but we like to get that, ball rolling so they have a goal to like shoot for. Each of our milestones are incentivized as well. So the incentives for completing the milestones are all based on, they're priced differently, basically. So depending on the task, it depends on how much you'll get back from us. With the TALS milestones and the incentives, basically the intent is to help our youth develop the necessary skills to be a successful adult outside of DCFS care. So typically most of that will happen with their regional, TAL coordinator. And we have all of those linked also at the very end, so we can get that. Next slide. All right, so we work really closely with workforce, with DWS for career and educational services that we can get our youth. Sometimes too, we also have, we use DWS for the Medicaid side as well. But most of our services, as far as like when our youth age out, like our educational training vouchers, they'll have to go to DWS, whether it be their local one that they have there, or if we need to find one that's closer that they don't have in there because it's a rural area, we can also help them track that down. So basically they'll go into DWS and they will go ahead and so that they're part of TAL. They'll fill out an application and then we'll go ahead and get their information and start sending them information as far as what they want to do. So the educational training vouchers are a bit different than like FAFSA. So these are for youth that are not necessarily wanting to go to a 4-year college immediately, or they don't even want to go at all. But let's say they want to do like massage therapy, go to a technical school, or do some sort of trade. We have vouchers that are available for our youth that they can use. There are some things to note. And again, if you click on the underline, it'll take you to the link that has all of the information that I'm talking about right now. But just for our information right now, when it comes to the ETVs, the funding is available up to the age of 26, and for a maximum lifetime of 5 years. So let's say somebody was to start using ETVs at 18 to 21, and then they took a break. If they're 23 and they wanted to go back to, finish whatever or tap back into that funding, they do still have that available to them because they didn't cap out from 19 to 21. They have like 1 or 2 years left. As long as they complete it before the age of 26, we'll still be able to provide that funding for them. So for the ETVs as well, the youth must be currently in foster care or have aged out / emancipated from the state by the age of 18. or was adopted or entered guardianship after their 16th birthday. Again, there's going to be some more information in those links that will go ahead and just break it down as far as the qualifications that they need and how to go about getting those fundings for them. I can go ahead and go to the next slide. So there are many different scholarships for an infamous of reasons, but especially for our foster youth. Some of the bigger ones, scholarships that most of our youth use are the Only Nest Transition to Adult Living Scholarship. And then this, I always mess up their name, the Singford G and Ellen G Carson Scholarship. Yeah, it's fine. So basically, these scholarships are designated specifically for our youth that are in transition to adult living and are aging out, or have had experience in foster care. Typically with these, you'll just have the youth go ahead and click on it, and the application is pretty simple. It does kind of ask for a brief story as to like what happened, well, not necessarily what happened, but what are your goals outside of, foster care? What have you learned from foster care? Things like that, more to put into that future thinking and forward thinking is kind of the goal there. For the scholarships there is also an age cutoff as well, which is also 26. So typically with the scholarships that I've found outside of these big ones, 26 is typically the age cutoff. So as long as that they've applied before their 26th birthday, they could still possibly get it even if they turn 26 at that time. They go off of the application date for that as well. So yeah, both of these scholarships are gonna be more, they kind of want not necessarily an essay, but they just want to have an explanation as to why and how you're going to use those funds. I will say, for being lived experience, anytime someone asks, so why were you in foster care? What are you doing in foster, or what are you wanting to do now? That was kind of a stressful situation as far as I don't know how to answer that, or I didn't know what I was supposed to say. And so in these, you don't have to let, it is important that we emphasize that the youth does not have to go into detail as to the trauma that they've endured. It's more of the growth aspect is kind of what they want to see. They want to see more about how you're going to use what you've been through to change your life, if that makes sense. I mean, youth are more than welcome to go ahead and explain everything, but they don't have to. And I just really feel like that needs to be emphasized, because sometimes in foster care it can be really difficult to know when I can say something or when I should or shouldn't say something based off of, the adults in the room, because we're so used to just basically being an open book, and it can get a little scary sometimes. But yeah, go ahead and go to the next one. So foster care to success is also another great financial resource that we have. It is also a scholarship as well. As far as I know, last time I checked, actually, for this school year, it's already closed, but it'll be opening up again for the following school year in June. The website also, I had to research this one because I didn't use foster care to success, but it basically has a few other there's multiple scholarships underneath this bracket or umbrella. Each of them will have a different requirement for applying, as far as like if they need an essay, or if it's just your grades, stuff like that. The Career Finder, I know this is out of order, but the Career One-Stop Scholarship Finder is also a really good resource. It has all of the scholarships that are available out, even if they don't have any foster care experience, or they don't have a lot of experience in foster care. There's also other opportunities for, finding scholarships with this one. I think that one's actually a really good resource to use, especially if they need more funding outside of what we can give them. So if they have some sort of skill that they developed in college or in high school that they want to continue, all of that, you can get a scholarship for being blue-eyed at this point. So there's always going to be something that they can use. As far as the FAFSA or FAFSA, I always say that's so weird. I feel like everyone does, but it's fine. So this is the the federal application that all of our youth are available for. So this one's actually pretty cool. If a youth, let's say, is 12 years old when they come into our care, and their birthday is the next day, which is really sad, and they have to spend it in foster care, and then the next day they end up getting placed back into their home. because they spent their 13th birthday in foster care, even if it was just 72 hours, they now actually get FAFSA for life now. So whenever they want to use it, they can use it, which is really nice. I do believe I'm not gonna lie, I use FAFSA a lot, capped out. That was fun. I believe it was like 7 years of funding for the Pell Grant. It just really just depends on the student's grades and their need, but also their credits. So depending on what school that they're going to, if they work really closely with their financial aid advisor, they can also help them kind of break that down so they can get get the view of how much money is going to be used each semester and vice versa. But I do think that's really awesome that, even if you're in foster care for a day during your 13th year, you now get access to that. So as long as they're 13 or older, that is theirs to use. That one's also it is a kind of a complicated application, mostly because it's long. The federal life is not supposed to be easy for anyone. So with this one too, most of this is handled through, they can do it on their own, or I always suggest just going into whatever college or higher education that they're wanting to go into and going to speak with their financial aid advisor. That way that they don't feel like they have to find the definitions for everything. They break it down for them, which is really nice. So yeah, that is our education as far as what we can offer for them outside of their because they were in foster care, now they have, some sort of incentives to go to school. And yeah. You can go to the next slide. And then for this, I'm gonna actually go ahead and hand this off I know this is part of mine, but I'm gonna hand this off to Cadon. He's our president for our state advisory, and I'll have him go ahead and break down the Youth Advisory Council.
Can you guys hear me? Okay, bear with me. I lost my voice over the holidays, so it's a little rough. But yes, Youth Advisory Council. So Youth Advisory Council started about like 10 years ago, roughly. And, DCFS was confronted with, we have our lived experience experts in foster care, and then we also have like our DCF staff. And we really wanted to like intertwine those and hear from the lived experience experts, the youth and foster care that are living it on a daily basis. And so our Youth Advisory Council started about 10 years ago. For me specifically, I joined our Youth Advisory Council about 2 years ago. I aged out of foster care at 18, and I knew about it a little bit, but I wasn't super familiar with the complexities of it. But about 2 years ago, so aged like 20, I really went full on like accessing those services. And so the Youth Advisory Council is anyone who is able and access those TAL funding, so the transition to adult living funding. So anyone that can access those services is able to join the Youth Council. And so it's really cool because it's a group of people that are passionate about advocating for change and passionate about different things that are affecting the foster care community. And there is kind of like a voting system. It's very like super not like strict or anything. And so I came in for the Southwest region, so St. George area, and I was like, you know what, I really want to be a part of this. And they voted me right in as the president of our Southwest region. And I was shook, honestly. I was excited to like continue to work and connect with different people. And then that started connecting me with our state youth advisory council. And then through the years that I've joined that, I was able to actually become the president of our region youth council. So for our state youth council is what I meant. For our region youth council, we meet once a month. We do have like our regular talk classes about 4 times a month, and then one of those is our youth council. And those youth councils are led by me and Kaylee, our Southwest Region Talk Coordinator. And we just, it's like I said, we just discuss different topics on different things that we want to change, different things that we think would be beneficial, class topics, things like that. And then our State Youth Advisory Council is also held once a month towards the end of the month. And it's very similar, but it's more, you sit down with Jennifer, Rachel, Milton, all of those people. And we discuss more, I guess you could say like more professionally, more structurized things that we want to change. And so it's really cool. It's being able to see it grow and turn into um, what it's been turning into. One of my tasks is actually creating a guide for foster youth. And so to kind of explain that, TAL services are just confusing, right? And a lot of youth that are coming in at these different ages aren't necessarily familiar with what TAL is, what our youth council is. And so I came across this idea to create a guide. And so this guide that I've been creating for the past, I would say, year is, I've been working with DCFS and our Youth Advisory Council and been getting that lived experience expertise in this guide. And hopefully it's going to be released. And I want it to be released to, all of the youth in foster care that are accessing these services. And it's really going to be from that lived experience voice. And it's going to be explaining what Youth Advisory Council is, what TAL is, what amazing opportunities that you have joining Youth Council, what services are available to you, what milestones are, what your caseworker is, what your guardian ad litem is, all these terms that quite honestly, like a lot of our youth are not familiar with. And so I think it's super exciting to see kind of where our youth advisory board has come and where we're going with things. I was able to attend this great opportunity in Washington D.C. with the I think it's called, what is it called? Journeys to Success program, where our youth council was able to go and advocate on Capitol Hill actually and speak to our senators and congressmen and really understand, I guess, from a congressional standpoint, the policies that are affecting our youth council. And so speaking of like the TAL funding, all of that is based under what's called Chafee funding. And Chafee funding I think it's $143 million it's allocated to all of the US and all the foster care systems. And then basically that's broken down between states. And so Utah, obviously, we don't have as much of a demographic of youth in foster care compared to like a state like California. And so that limits us when it comes to like the funding that we have. And so like Rachel was saying, we get incentives for the milestones and stuff like that. Um, we aren't always able to access the full amount to those funding just because we run out and the funding is full. And then that's also broken down by region as well. Um, I think another part that's really sad to all of this, when it comes to TAL is, you have that cutoff for the Chafee funding and TAL. And so once you hit 23, you lose access to all of that. And so it's really hard because those milestones are really supposed to be encouraging us and teaching us to learn these skills, to budget, to handle our finances, to find stable housing, and etc. But then we have that cutoff and our funding's gone. And so just once again, yeah, that's kind of what our Youth Advisory Council is. We came up with this little quote, nothing about us without us. I think that's really important to just reiterate just because we are the lived experience experts of our life, and I think it's a little tone deaf, I think, in like DCFS and foster care when it's like you have all these team members and staff like, we want what's best for you, which I think they obviously do. At the same time, it's like we know what's best for our life. Like we're the ones who dealt with the trauma, we're the ones who seen and like been taken away from our families, be whatever circumstance that might be. And so nothing about us really just resonates that we are the experts of our own life. But yeah, that's where Youth Advisory Council is. I think I'm also talking next. I'm not exactly sure for the next slide. Okay, so we'll go back to Jennifer and then back to me later.
All right, Cadon gave us just this amazing segue. So thank you, Rachel and Cadon, for your knowledge on these topics. The segue, though, really that I want to mention is our youth. DCFS comes in and we have a goal to provide safety. And I think we're really good at coming up with strategies for safety. We're really good at helping people access treatment and things like that. What sometimes we're out of touch with, though, is how it impacts the entire family and how it impacts our youth. And so one of the areas that I'll go back to really from my presentation is that our youth oftentimes feel out of control. And when we feel out of control, we have a lot more survival behaviors that come in. And so we have anger that comes in. Sometimes we have a kid who's very anxious, very high in anxiety, because they might be worried about, like, where am I going to be living next month? Am I even going to be in the same school? Some of the youth that came across my doorway in my house had been to like 4 or 5 different high schools in the matter of a year or 2 years. And so, and what we know as educators is really changing high schools changes a lot. One high school might offer electives in psychology classes, and the next school doesn't have anything even remotely close to that. And sometimes our youth are moving in the middle of a quarter. And so we have to try and figure out all those tricky pieces to keeping their education flowing and getting them their credits to graduate high school. How that feels for the youth, though, oftentimes is that they feel very out of control of their own lives. We do have goals and guidelines to help youth have more of a voice and help them have more power, as far as being able to run their own team meetings and call team meetings. An area that really on this one is kind of what I really wish I knew as a foster parent and as an educator. An area that I've been good at advocating for a while for is a youth can call their own team meeting. So if they have a need they want to address with their team, they can call and run their own team meeting. The issues that we have is a lot of times youth don't know that they can, or they're afraid to because they feel like they've lost their voice and they feel like they don't have that real piece of control to be able to say, hey, I need to talk to my team about something. What do I do about it? A lot of times our youth feel like they have to sit back and wait for somebody else to call a meeting or take action first. And so they're kind of stuck in a spot where they're waiting for the next team meeting or the next whatever that is to happen. And I think that's something really important that we recognize is that our youth have lost their voice. Our youth council is trying to help youth bring their voice back. But we can only do that as far as the youth that actually know about it and are involved in it. And we have youth out there that really don't know about those services and don't know they can access it. What I wished I would have known as a foster parent, who most of the youth I took all of them were over the age of 10. Most of them were 14 to 19 years old. So we were a family that we did have youth that would come to our home at age like 17 and a half, the last half of their senior year in high school. That happened quite frequently, that a youth would come into care, and we were one of the only local families that were taking teenagers. And so we were like, hey, we're here for you. We're going to make sure you don't have to go somewhere else to finish high school. You get to graduate with your class that you've grown up with. The things that were really difficult to navigate, and this is someone that worked in the counseling center at the school as well, things that were really difficult to navigate were the Olin Walker Scholarship. It's now on our website. 10 years ago, it was really tricky and really confusing for school counselors to find information on what youth can apply, what is the criteria, where's the application, how do we get it to them? And so that one is now on our website. The Siegfried and Carson Scholarship, also there's a link on our website for that. Those are easier to find now. I had no idea as a foster parent about the education and training vouchers. And those programs came into existence in 2001. I wasn't licensed until 2006. So the education training voucher program has been around for a long time. And yet we have youth that know nothing about it. School counselors know nothing about it. And so education and training vouchers is a really big one for me that I really didn't know about until I took a job with the state office last year in November. Some very important things to know about education and training vouchers. The youth do have to apply through Workforce Services through WIOA. They do not have to be eligible for WIOA to obtain education and training vouchers. So education and training vouchers, as Rachel mentioned, are available to all youth that have aged out of foster care 18 or older, or youth that are 16 and older when they are adopted or permanent custody and guardianship takes place. Education and training vouchers. I know Rachel touched on all of this, but I think this is a great emphasis. A lot of times when you're working in the school, we know there are programs that are very specific to universities or secondary accredited colleges. Education and training vouchers can be used, as Rachel said, for anything. We have been able to help youth that wanted to learn how to become a tattoo artist, be able to go to training to become a tattoo artist, nursing programs and things like that. Youth that need to pay for a CNA program, but maybe they're not doing it at a university. We're able to take those education and training vouchers and pay for things like that can actually help a child have a career going forward in that non-traditional sense. And so the reason I find that so unique is most of the programs I worked for when I worked in the schools were post-secondary opportunities that didn't even include trade schools. With ETVs, it's trade schools, it's any type of training program that a youth can access. I think that's a big one that I really want mentors and school counselors to know about, because it's been around for a long time. And I know I did not know about that, and I was working in the school counseling center. I think as well, FAFSA gets really, really confusing because most schools have like FAFSA nights. And in a FAFSA night, there are a lot of volunteers that are helping out, and volunteers only know what information we can give them. So FAFSA was one that became really confusing as well, in that a youth qualifies for FAFSA if they're in custody and guardianship, and custody and guardianship is from birth forward. So there's no age limit on that. They can qualify for FAFSA with no parental income being declared. When a youth has any type of foster care stay, as Rachel was mentioning, it does not matter the length of time at all. At 13 years old or older, any type of foster care, lengthened foster care qualifies them to also have that, not using that parental information. Where that becomes confusing in a school setting when we have volunteers working with youth is that then we have Ole and Walker and these other scholarships that are 16 plus, and sometimes we have volunteers that don't realize that FAFSA is 13 plus and not 16 plus. And so we go to a lot of work of trying to find parental information and things like that that the youth themselves might not have a lot of access to, when it's unnecessary to do so because they've had a foster care stay at 13 years old or older. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here on this one, but that really has been one that FAFSA and not having to declare parental income is a big deal for a lot of youth in foster care, because their birth parents maybe either aren't working, or they're not open to giving that income, the income information over to their child or to the school. And so those are the reasons why it's so important to kind of have that understanding, the ins and outs of that 13 or older with FAFSA. They just need to be able to get there's a letter that we can give them stating that they were in care. And so those are helpful tips. So Rachel, I want to turn the time over to Rachel about what she learned and what she needed to know when she was in care and when she was aging out as well.
So this year I have been officially out of the state's custody for 10 years. So it's a lot has changed in that time. But when I was in care, as far as the academic side, I think that's where I really excelled as an individual. Going home, I was not the best, but we'll get into that later. So I feel like when it came to asking questions about, what I needed to know to further my education, I was very involved with my advisor at the time, and she was very helpful. She definitely informed me on a lot of things. I think the parts that she didn't really have a lot of information was more about the Alleen scholarship and then other scholarships that are available. But she was really helpful as far as FAFSA, and yeah, that was really all it was, actually, now I think about it. But that was the most difficult part back then, so it's okay. Like I said, I feel like when I was in care, I was academically, I was really well off. I actually ended up graduated valedictorian, and I finished my degree or my diploma at 16. But when my judge was like, "Do you want to be emancipated?" I was like, "Girl, bye. I don't even know how to take care of myself right now. So like, what am I gonna do?" But it ended up working out to where I was able, I did have the opportunity to go to like the MTC that was close to my high school. But for some reason I turned it down. If I can go back, I would have, you know, done that. And then my senior year, I would have been able to leave with my cosmetology degree. And yet, yeah, now I think about it, that was a poor decision, but it's fine. Moving on. We're here now. So I think for me, what I wish I had more information about was the scholarships, and also the ETVs. I don't think my high school knew about that, let alone my team either. As far as the rest of the lived experience portion of outside of academics, I feel like when going back to what Jennifer was saying about, youth being able to call their own team meetings, sometimes that works. Well, I mean, actually, I don't know anymore, but at the time, it was really difficult to get people together for some reason when I called a team meeting. I think it was also because I was a little bit stubborn and I really actually, no, they just didn't care. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys. Like, that's really what it came down to. There was always a reason to cancel, and or they would say, yeah, we'll get it done, and then it never happened. So that can actually maybe a part of the reason why, if you have youth that are 14 or older that aren't calling their team meetings, maybe figure out why. Just because there's chances are it's just because they feel like they're not going to be heard anyway. So why bother? At least that was my experience. So I guess I kind of wish I had more supportive people on my team at the time, but yeah. I want to give it to Cadon because I feel like that's really all I have to say.
So what I want you to know as a youth currently accessing services, I would just say simply put, they're really confusing and they're not really well written out. And so to that point, like I mentioned before, part of what I'm doing as the president of our youth advisory board is creating that guide. Um, I think that guide is really going to be able to um, echo really what these services are for the youth. Um, like I said, they're very confusing, and you really do have to put in the work to really understand what they're talking about. Um, I also want to say too, accessibility. So a part of my journey in foster care was actually more residential and lockdown programs. And so in those systems and facilities, I wasn't able to access these services. And so I think when it comes to these services, make sure that there is like accessibility for those youth, even though they're in those, I guess you could say, other types of programs. And I would say, from what I know, I minimally talk to youth that are in foster care currently. Um, some of the programs are doing good at um, hosting and talking to DCFS about, the town meetings and stuff like that. But I think that was one part that I really, really it was just really detrimental to my growth and just some of the services that I could have accessed were lost because of that. Um, as far as like the TAL and the milestone funding that I am still currently accessing, um, like I said, it is still really, really confusing. I think we're looking into revamping the milestones, and so hopefully that will be something that is a little bit more explained easily to where the youth can really understand that, okay, they're learning this skill and then they're going to be getting this incentive from it. Um, I think that will really be beneficial. I would also say to just making the youth aware of it. I get emails from Kaylee and different people in DCFS, but it's very brief. And so I think if there was a way for DCFS to somehow like sit down and talk to us or, give us that guide, I think would be really beneficial to really understanding what services are that we have access to. Um, Yeah, that's really all I have as far as the services that I'm accessing currently. Um, just once again, I think it's just a sad reality that you have that cutoff of 23 because I know for me and so many other people that I care about close into my life, like, that time has already come, and um, we don't have the support, we don't have those permanent connections, like you could say, in our life to really um, help us out. And so if that could be extended to 26, that, I think that would be amazing. So that's part of the work I'm doing when it comes to policy and advocating. Um, but yeah, I would say um, that's my experience getting to know these services.
Thank you, Cadon and Rachel, again. So a couple of things I'll add before we go to questions is really what we need from educators, from mentors. A lot of times youth do lose their voice when they come into care. Secondly, even if their case is closed, so maybe they did go to adoption or they emancipated at age 18, and that happens around the same time that they graduate high school. Our youth are very afraid of things like, what does it mean if I'm 17 years old and I work with a TAL coordinator? Does that mean that I'm somehow going to come back into DCFS custody? Or what hoops do I have to jump through to access these services? And so we're not only at arm's length away from the youth, but sometimes they're like, no way, I'm not speaking to you. You're DCFS, and DCFS caused me pain in my life. Everything wasn't good. Even though you might have helped the situation become safe again, I went through a lot during that time. And so one thing we know is youth can be very connected to mentors and school counselors. And so we do have a big push going on right now, really to work with school districts to educate school counselors, interventionists, here with YIC check and connect mentors and things like that, because we know our youth might have the relationship with them to seek help that they don't have with us. And so one of the ways that we can really work to team with school professionals is for them to understand that youth accessing aftercare services does not mean a child is back in custody. And it does not mean a child's at risk of coming back into custody because of lack of resources. Those are some of the worries that our youth have. And so we need our mentors and our school counselors to really help a youth understand that you might have to talk to a DCFS TAL coordinator to learn about some of these things, or to get involved in them, or to receive payment if they do attend a TAL class. If they want to receive their incentives for attending that class, they're going to have to work with DCFS a little bit to some extent. But if they have a trusted adult in their life that can help facilitate them reconnecting with DCFS TAL aftercare and understanding that they're not at risk of coming back into care or losing the power and control they have in their lives, they're not at risk of that changing with aftercare services. And so we need help having our youth be able to reconnect with us when they become disillusioned with us, so that they can access services. And that's all I wanted to add to that. And at this point in time, I think we still have a few minutes that we can take some questions.
Can I ask you something?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Last year and this year, I have a senior. Last year, I have to reach to everybody, so the TAL agent helped my student. He was a senior. My two seniors, last year and this year, they are very successful, very successful. Almost straight A's, with a lot of accomplishments, and they are on extracurriculum classes and everything. So when last year a student started doing all this process, and they assigned him the TAL agent, believe me, it was really hard for us to reach this person. I had to call them like 3 times, and I had to go to the team meeting and tell them, please, he need help, because there are certain things that I cannot help him. You have to do it. And it took me a while. So my student got the incentive that he deserved, and the TAL person to be doing her job. This year, I'm having almost the same problems with the TAL agent. I had not been able to reach her. My student told me that she, and now that I'm seeing that this person had to meet with them every month, this is not happening, first of all. And the second thing is that when she have one meeting with her and she's not following her. So she's not following the needs of my students. So it's been really hard. And this year, I always send all my milestone list of my student every quarter so they can get a little something, because they are being successful and they are hard. This student, my junior, when I got her last year, she was 3 credits deficient. She transferred another school because she had a fight on the previous school. And right now he's a model student. She have almost a straight A. She have everything what she accomplished, believe me, is amazing. And I asked the case worker in a team meeting last month, and I say, did you receive the milestone list? Because it was last quarter and she had not get anything. And she say, Julieta, we are focused on the kids that they are struggling, that the kids that they it's hard for them to get an A or an B. And I say, and I told the case worker, my student has been struggling for months, but right now she's in a place where she is succeeding and she needs this milestone, what is that? What do you call incentive, right? Why she cannot have it just because she have almost straight A's and behavior, why she's amazing and she's in the CTA program and she's doing amazing. That doesn't mean that it was hard for her to get to this point. So why she cannot get the incentive? And that's what she told me, well, we are trying to give the incentive to the kids that they are struggling the most to motivate them with this incentive. And I say, wow, okay. So that's what I wanted to talk to about this. And the tall person, agents 2 times, I have experienced that they are not reachable, they are not helping my students. So who I can talk to, like what agency we need to contact so they can we can get a better approach to my student, because my student is a senior right now and she needs a lot of help.
So
I-
what, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say just real fast. So yeah, it's very interesting hearing you say that, just because at least from my understanding of the milestones, the incentives are actually for students that are getting, there's milestones specifically in there, having straight A's, having a certain GPA. So that's a little confusing for me. I think there probably is just a miscommunication, and I'll send that off to Jennifer to answer that.
Yeah, because that was what the gay worker told me that in front of the whole team meeting. So I was kind of like but I told her that everything that I told you right now, that my student, struggled and got to this point that she's successful. I say that all at the meeting. So she didn't say anything else, after that. So.
Okay, so attached, if you can go to the next slide, Chelsea or whoever's running the slides. So, and there's one after this, but we'll pause on this one for a moment. So I am the transition to adult living program administrator. If you're having a problem that you feel like you cannot resolve within the region that the student lives in, you can send me an email or give me a phone call and we'll try and help get to the bottom of the problem. And so one of the issues with TAL incentives, Rachel did mention, we have a pot of money, and that pot of money sometimes can run out. And so that's one of the things that we would be looking at in a situation like what you're mentioning is there a reason that maybe we don't know of why that's bigger than that? But anytime you're struggling with a TAL coordinator, or if you have a youth that's not having access to their TAL coordinator, you can reach out to me and I'll try and make sure that we get you connected to the right services and the right people to help.
Yeah, because I'm sending every quarter all my students' achievements and the milestone, specifying exactly what they have been done with proof, like because we have the list and with proof of everything, So another, I didn't remember this, but I have a junior, and the case worker told me, she told me something like you're saying right now, that they were short of money, that the budget was not the same. But either way, I'm thinking that, because honestly, believe me, my students, they are very successful and I have proof of that. And I send everything to the case worker, but at least something that they can get is to motivate my students, because sometimes it's something that help, honestly. I have been giving them myself my own, prizes for, because I want them to understand that they are succeeding, and well, anyway, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, so and if we can go to the next slide and give people a chance to take the information of the, so that's our entire, those two slides have our entire TAL coordination team on them. And so, but if there's a problem that you can't resolve locally within your own local teams, you can always reach out to me and we'll try and help figure out what the appropriate solution is, or if there's something that is a barrier, then at least we can get you accurate information as to what we need to do differently.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Jennifer and Rachel and Cadon, for your time. I am seeing on the clock that it is time to switch over to the other presentation. So if you all still have questions, please reach out to the contacts that were shared. As usual, you can reach out to me and I can send you these by email. They will be in the follow-up that I'll get out in the next day or two so that you all have access to these contacts. But I greatly appreciate the time that the presenters took with us this morning, because based on the conversation, we know how precious your time is and how limited the resources are. So I really appreciate you guys taking time to be with us today. So thank you so much. Let me stop the screen share and welcome our next presenter, Melissa, who I'm pretty sure, yes, she is on. All right, Melissa, so you are welcome to take it away.
All right. Well, are you going to share my slides? Or...
Yes. Oh,
okay.
That's right. You know what? We've had a fun morning. Let me get them in there.
That's
Just
okay.
one moment.
But I just wanted to say thank you to Jennifer, Cadon, and Rachel. Like, I have been sold on the TAL program when I'd heard about it, and I talked to Milton, who's in Utah County, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a great program. So I was super excited to hear you guys were here. And anyway, I think it's amazing, and I'm glad that you're bringing more attention to the schools, because I think the more that the kids can be known about it is all the better. So I'm with the Utah Parent Center, and I am feeling like I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces, and you might, we're going to be doing a lot of the same, talking about a lot of the same that I did last time, but I guess it's always good to have a refresher. But if you haven't heard of us, we've been around actually for 40 years, and we are, but my position is fairly new. I started in 2022 and as a youth in custody consultant. And so that's probably why you haven't heard of us as much, because we haven't been reaching out to the YIC people before that. And basically what we are is a resource center for parents with kids with disabilities, and the professionals also that work with them. And all 50 states are required to have a parent information center according to the special education law. And so we are actually for the state of Utah. And for the people that, we've had a few questions like, what are the kind of the qualifications that we can work with you? And it's really anything. So a disability can mean anything from something undiagnosed like ADHD or something, or even some challenging behaviors that you're dealing with, mental health issues or physical disabilities and intellectual disabilities, or just a combination of anything. We can help you and work with you. Okay, do you want to go to the next slide? Let's see, now I need to go on my screen to the next slide. Okay, so what we are is, as we're parents helping parents. So all of us at the Parent Center have a child with a disability. It's a requirement to actually work at the Parent Center. So we're all familiar with the disability world. We're familiar with special education. We've all been through that. And right now we have about 45 employees. So that's a lot of different disabilities and a lot of different experiences that we've all had. And so we kind of have that unique perspective of being a parent ourselves, and we can provide, real life experiences that we've had, empathetic peer support, and just the positive lessons that we've learned, and also the negative lessons that we've learned. And so if I don't know how to answer a question, then one of my coworkers, there's a good chance that one of them will know. And my son with a disability, he graduated 2 years ago, which is a huge accomplishment, because getting any teenager to apply themselves is sometimes challenged, but especially he had a learning disability, and kids with a learning disability, school is not fun. It's hard. And so, it's hard to motivate these kids to graduate. And, but, I said something, I said, it's not fun, but it was fun for him. And that was something that it was super hard, and he didn't like the academic part of it, but he was able to find the fun and engage in some outside activities, extracurricular things. And so encourage that to make it fun as much as they can. But he was in elementary school when he started receiving special education services. And so I've been to lots of IEP meetings and things, but after getting this job, then I learned so much more, and I could have advocated for him more, I realized. And for some of my other kids, I probably could have advocated for them to get on a 504 plan, if you've heard of that. But sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And so that's why I'm here, because maybe you don't know what you can do to help. And so I want you to be able to help these kids as much as possible. Okay, next slide. So what we do, we provide services statewide to parents and professionals. And what we do usually is one-on-one consultations. So they're confidential, and we try to help in whatever way necessary. If you call the Utah Parent Center, like the main number, then they'll have a receptionist that will take your information down and ask you a few questions, and then put you in a call document, and put it to the right person. And then depending how busy we are, it could be that day, or it could be a week or two even. And if you call my direct number, then I'm usually can take it right then or that day. So I just want to give some examples of calls from parents and professionals that we've had, that I've had, so you can understand that maybe I've heard these kind of questions before. So maybe a parent's having their first IEP meeting, and they don't know what to expect, or wondering what they should do. Maybe they don't agree with the IEP, or they don't think it's going as planned, or it's not working out. Wondering what kind of accommodations they can ask for. Behavior is really a problem, and they feel like that's impacting their education. Maybe the school is dragging their feet with a special education evaluation, and you're just wondering what needs to be done. Maybe the student doesn't qualify for special education, but you know that they have some kind of disability. So what should you do? Maybe a child's kicked out of school due to behaviors. So what's next? What can they do? And then I've gotten a lot of calls from professionals just asking for outside resources for like therapy or recreational ideas, where a parent can get a diagnosis, and even resources to help families in different ways, maybe like parenting classes or medical insurance, help for a student who's aging out of DCFS, or getting vocational rehab involved. And maybe you don't know who the parent should be at the IEP meetings. So no question's dumb. We know that there is a lot of, special education is pretty confusing, and that there's a lot that most people don't know. And then there really is just an infinite amount of questions related to disability. It's amazing, people that have worked here for 20 years, and they're like, I don't know the answer to that. There's lots of questions about things. And then going to the next thing, trainings. We do trainings and workshops. So if you go to our website, which I'll give you a link in another slide, but there is like tonight, there's well, if you go to our website, there's a tab at the top called events. And if you click on that, then it goes to a calendar and you can just see what's going on every day, you know, this month and next month. And so like tonight, there is a workshop that's called Anxiety at School and How to Get Help. That's tonight at 6:30, I think. And that's just over Zoom. So you can join that. You just click on, I think it says website. I wish it would say sign up, but it says website, and you can just click on that and join that. Also this weekend, there is some in-person workshops that are navigating sexuality and healthy relationships. And those are closed at this point because it's like an 8-week course or something. But so those are in person, but most are over Zoom. And so even if it says like Iron County is putting on something, you can join over Zoom. People do that all the time. If you're not in Iron County. And then like next week, there's parents as partners in the IEP process, be an advocate and nurturing an advocate in the community. And there's just something actually every day next week. And some are in person, but most, like I said, are over Zoom. And the second Tuesday of the month is Transition University. We call it TU Tuesday. And that's transitioning from school to post-school. So January was called All About Self-Determination, and February is all about life after school. And most of the workshops are done in the evening, but sometimes there's what they call lunch and learn. So there's a lunch, you know, lunchtime, half hour to an hour presentation or workshop too. So those are super great. As professionals, you can join them. You can tell parents about it, and they're all free. And then also, you know, we can also attend IEP meetings. So if you feel like there's not like great collaboration or communication, or parents nervous and just want support, we can attend. And, you know, we can attend virtually. We can attend virtually if it's not too far. And one thing I just want to note is that it's not us against the school. You know, I think sometimes people think, oh, it's the Utah Parent Center is here, you know, as a parent advocate, you know, wanting to gang up against the school. And that's not true at all. Like, we are just looking out for the student, just like everybody is. And sometimes we're just helping that parent understand the special education process. They might have one thing in mind, but it really is that, you know, different. You know, like sometimes special ed teachers talk special ed. And so sometimes helping put that into lay language for that and helping parents understand, because sometimes you just are clueless, you know, starting out. I remember I was just like, I don't even know what anything is. And then we can do presentations. Like if your group wants me to come do a presentation or something, then we can do that also. Okay, go to the next slide. Just really fast, I'll just go over this. So the parent training and information, that's usually that's kind of the backbone of the project of our organization. That's where talking a lot about education and special education and helping navigate that, and then transition universities, the whole curriculum developed by a team to guide parents to life after school. That focuses on like guardianship and graduation, dependence and wills and all that. And then Utah Family Voices focuses on all things health related. So like signing up for SSI and Medicaid, DSPD, like autism support groups. And we all overlap a lot. We're all working together and stuff too. And then our Family to Family Network is a group of volunteers that are in the state. And there's local chapters throughout the state that meet and they do activities and they network together and they offer trainings. So like in Tooele, there's a woman, and so she organizes an event and they meet with other people in Tooele and they get connected to other resources. And it's great because parents talking to other parents is actually super useful. And they don't have to feel alone, and they also get a lot of information, like what other people have tried and stuff. So I just noticed like a while ago in December, there was like a hot cocoa with Santa in Weber County. So they do like disability friendly events and things like that too, like maybe an egg hunt in the spring. So it's a great organization. Okay, next slide. So part of our parent training is that we have actually specific district or regional educational consultants. So all these districts have someone that's contracted with that district. And so these, obviously none of these are youth in custody like related, they're just disability, but they're knowledgeable about the district, and all the districts that have them really, I think, value them. They work together with them. They answer a lot of questions that the school does not have to answer, you know, and so I think everyone that has contracted a consultant is very happy that they have it. And then youth in custody, I actually work statewide because, you know, we know that these kids are transient and they're moving all over, and so it doesn't make sense to just stay in a district. So, you know, if you're working with a child and you live in Granite District, you can certainly call the Granite Jennifer, or you can call me, and we work together a lot. And so either way is great. Okay, next slide. Here is our website, and our website has lots of great information on it. And let me put it in the chat here. Oh, actually, that just went to Amanda. Amanda, do you mind sending that out to the rest of the group? Okay. Yeah, so I just saw that text from Kelly, who is in Tooele, and our parent consultant, Christine, is there in Tooele, and she works in the same office. And yeah, she's doing a Love and Logic with special needs, which is, I think, going to be a really great program. Super excited about that. Love and Logic it's a great program, and then to do it with the special needs is awesome. Okay, so our website is great. On the homepage, you can go down. If you scroll down to the bottom, you can sign up for our newsletter, and it talks about different events, and you can actually sign up for like Granite School District's newsletter, and you can sign up for our like maybe an autism specific newsletter. But we just send like just events that we're doing, and then like our summer resource guide, we're working on that right now. And we'll send that out February or March. And that's like all the recreational things that are for disabilities or just that are inclusive. And then you can, anyway, so that's what that is. And then about lists all of our projects and the contact information. I actually think I'm not on that page, and I don't know why. I talked to them once, and I need to talk to them again, make sure I get put on there. But you can also find those family to family leaders contact information. So you can go find that Tooele family to family leader and contact them and get connected to what they're doing. The disabilities, there's a lot of information on there, and the resources is like a ton of information. That's where you can get our publications, transition information, behavior link. There's IEPs and bullying and math and mental health, etc. So there's just a ton of information there. And then our events tab is the upcoming calendar and the workshops that we're doing. And then we have that Spanish, and there's actually we have most everything in Spanish, and we have 2 Spanish-speaking consultants, and we also have 2 Spanish-speaking admins. So if you have a Spanish-speaking parent, we can take care of them right from the get-go. They can give us a call and get help that they need. And then we're contracted with another service. If there's another language, we can work with that too. Okay, next slide. We put out these publications every year, and they're super great. There's and they're so popular. We've actually run out right now. We're trying to find funding to reprint them, but we do have some still. But anyway, there's the choices catalog that is, or workbook. That's like, it's not a workbook, but a handbook, I think we call it. And that is all about all the things that a parent doesn't really know that they needed to know as a child's transitioning out, about wills and trusts and signing up for DSPD and guardianship and SSI, all the things that are important to know. And then our other, and then the successful transitions for youth. I really like this workbook, and I'll just connect it here. Okay, that one is actually something that you fill out, like the youth fills out, and they fill it out with their parents. I think it's actually like great for any, I just have one here. So like, you know, there's a page talking about like having them answer these questions, like what's something you enjoy making or creating, just to help them learn about themselves. Like, where do you feel most comfortable in the community? What types of work or projects cause you to feel a lot of stress? So just to help them get thinking and talking and becoming more familiar with themselves. And then in the book, there's like different checklists and goals for them to work on, because all these kids, they want to move out, and these kids that are in custody, they are going to be on their own. And so it's great for them to be able to work on these. So, you know, some things that would be important. Do you know how to make emergency calls? Can you use it? Do you know how to use an ATM in a safe, secure area? Do you avoid using a cell phone or listening to music while walking in order to stay alert? You know, do you know basic first aid? So just kind of just basic things that seem kind of no duh to us, but to, I think, most any kid, these are really important skills that they have to learn. Another one is like, know how to operate the washer and dryer. Do you know how to sort your clothes? Do you know how to select the right dryer cycle? Do you know how to hang your clothes up? So just different goals for them to work on, you know, for them to be able to possibly move out on their own. And then there's like also in the back, like a community mapping. I don't know if you can, not useful to hold it up. Anyway, it has like, who do you feel comfortable talking to in the community? Who is part of your community that you can reach out to for help? And I think these are all super useful for any child, but especially youth in custody. And then we have the guardianship booklet, and then that helps them walk through guardianship, and then the parents as partners in the IEP process that we're actually in the process of rewriting, but I believe you can find that on our website, and all of these you can find under resources on our website. Okay, next slide. So, like I said, I'm the youth in custody consultant, and I work with parents, professionals. As you know, there's not probably a lot of parents that are reaching out about their child's education. And so that's kind of one of the last things on their list. But you're welcome to give my information out to caseworkers or JJYS, like case managers or parole officers, if you're working with any of them. And then also, like, if you're working with a family, and these kids don't have to be like in custody either. Like if they are in and out of custody, or just on the edge, like working with youth services, or there's just a family that's really needing some additional resources that you're aware of. And I can't just call them if you tell me, but if you want to get permission from them, then I can give them a call. Because sometimes that's just one more thing on their plate. You know, I know as a parent with a child with disability, you're just trying to keep your head above water, and just to have someone call me would actually be super helpful, because it's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And then, you know, you just have a lot on your plate, just as all families do. And so, yeah, so just anyone that you are working with, feel free to give my information out, or the Utah Parent Center information. And I have like cards that I like, you can see that, that are just my information and who I work with and stuff. And if you would like me to mail you some cards, let me know, and you can give them out to families or, foster parents or whatever. Because it's just really, these kids are raising a child with a disability can be difficult, and these kids can be difficult. And so just knowing that there's someone that they can reach out to is super helpful. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we know that there is a high percentage of kids in state custody that have a disability. So 11 to 13% with a disability in Utah, but in custody last year in the school year, there was 33%. And so we know that they're super vulnerable and that they can really use all the help that they can get. And that's kind of where my position came along, is that these kids, there's a lot of them and they really could use a lot of help. Okay, next slide. So I'm just going to do a brief overview of the individualized education program. And if you don't know what that is, that's part of the special education program. And it's part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that's a federal education law for children with disabilities. And it provides an individualized education program. So that's where the IEP, if you hear that, that's what that means. Just means their special education program that's individualized for them. And so, how I'm hoping that you have been invited to IEP meetings, because as Check and Connect mentors, I feel like you're like more in touch than almost anyone. You're meeting with these kids once a week. You're tracking their behavior and their academics and their attendance. You're a super useful person to have at that meeting. And so if you have not been invited, I know you're probably going, I don't want to go to another meeting, but let the special education teachers know, and the school counselors and the principal know who you are if they don't know, and just so and let them know that you would like to be involved in their IEP meetings. Okay, next slide. So this is like the IEP process, and we'll talk about all the different things individually, but it's just nice to see. So it starts with a referral, and that can be either from a parent or a school, Check and Connect mentor, or anyone on the child and family team, a DCFS caseworker. And then they can send a referral, and then the school decides if they want to do an evaluation on that child after looking at some data. And after they do the evaluation, then they decide if the child is eligible for special education. And then an IEP meeting is held with the parent and the rest of the team to determine the needs and the goals, to determine the child's placement. And that's kind of what kind of services they'll be getting, which is different than location. With youth in custody, placement is used for location. That's kind of confusing, but this is kind of what services they'll be getting. And at that point, then IEP is being implemented and carried out. And then at least once every year, then they'll do an annual review IEP meeting with the parent to determine the new goals for the year and make sure the placement's correct and anything else that they want to address in the IEP. And then an evaluation, and the annual review, it happens at least once a year, but if it needs to happen more often, that's certainly, if you feel like, oh, the IEP is not going well, or the child's not progressing, then you can request to have another IEP meeting. And it's just a requirement to have it once a year, but you can have it more often. And then the evaluation happens every 3 years. So they don't need to do an evaluation every year. So they just do that every 3 years. But if you feel like they need to be evaluated for something else, then you can request it more often. So my son he was getting pulled out for math, but I knew his reading was really struggling. And so I asked if they could do an evaluation for that, and they were able to do that. Okay, So next slide. Child find is a really important part of the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and all schools and districts are required to have different programs that they can identify children with a disability. And so in the law, it states, you know, highly mobile, those who have a disability and advancing from grade to grade, and then students in state custody. So they are responsible for addressing that. Okay, next slide. So because they're responsible as a employee that's working with the kids often, it's important for you to, you know, talk to someone and say, hey, I think that this child needs an evaluation. But when you're going to request, you don't have to do it in writing, but we know that everyone is overworked and things get dropped. So if you put something in writing, then that's super helpful to just be able to fall back on that. So put something in writing to the school. You can give it to the principal, to the counselor, if you know who the special education person is. Send an email just saying, and the teacher, you know, I think this student is really struggling, and, you know, talk about their needs and their concerns that they have, what's happening, maybe even at home, or any diagnoses that they've gotten. And so, you know, just request an evaluation. And then in the law, it says that the school can decide or not decide to evaluate, and they have to respond within a reasonable time frame. So whatever that means. But usually if you don't hear back within a week, then or two, I would reach back out and just say, hey, you know, what else we need to do to get this going? But the school also has to say in writing if they're going to deny to the parent. If they're going to deny doing an evaluation, they look at the data, they're saying, hey, you know what, this child does not have behaviors, they're doing well academically, they seem like they're doing fine, we're not going to evaluate. Or they have to put something in writing saying, yes, we are going to evaluate. And to be able to evaluate, they actually have to get written consent from the parent. And then the timeline begins. And so once they get that written consent, then the school has 45 school days to evaluate that child. Or if a DCFS requests it, then they have 30 days. So it's much quicker. But I'm going to say, since I'm talking to all school people, I would not wait for DCFS to request, because we know that they're overworked and stuff. And so they may not ever do it. So I would not wait on that. You can submit it yourself and then ask them to submit it, and that might get it done faster, but I would get that in without worrying about them as much. And then these 3 questions have to be answered after they do the evaluation. They have to ask these 3 questions, and if they answer yes to all these 3 questions, then they qualify for special education. So, you know, number 1, does the student have a qualifying disability? And on the next page, we'll talk about what those qualifying disabilities are, and there's 13 of them. Does the disability adversely affect the student's educational performance? So just because a child has autism doesn't necessarily mean that they need an IEP. If they are doing fine academically and functionally, they're able and socially, and they're doing okay, then, you know what, let's not give them specially designed instruction, modified instruction, because that might actually hold them back. If they're doing fine, let's just keep encouraging them. And then number 3, does the student require specially designed instruction? So if they answer all 3 to those, then they qualify for special education. Okay, next slide. So here's the 13 disabilities under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And they have to qualify in one of those. And sometimes they might qualify in multiple, but it's just whichever is affecting their education the most. They don't need a medical diagnosis to get a special education, but a lot of them do require like some medical information. So that doesn't mean like a diagnosis, like right now, diagnosis to get an autism diagnosis is like, I think about a year out. And so you don't have to wait a year to get on special education. But just something from the doctor, maybe talking about like, looks like they're deficient in these areas. We've submitted a autism to get an autism diagnosis and things like that. So things from the doctor are always helpful. But just because a doctor, sometimes doctors request an IEP. So the doctor says, oh, your child has autism, go and get them on an IEP. But actually the doctor doesn't really get to request an IEP. It's actually an education evaluation that they do. And so it's always helpful to have doctor's notes and things, but they still have to do the evaluation and see if they answer yes to all three of those questions. A question that's come up is like ADHD. Is that a 504, which is like providing accommodations, or would it be under special education, which is modification curriculum and also accommodations? And it can go either way. If it's really impacting their education, then that could be an IEP, or it might just be a 504. So my son Spencer, he was diagnosed with ADHD, and he was really struggling in school, and I just thought it was related to his ADHD. And I'm really grateful the teacher came to me and said, hey, would you like to get him evaluated for special education? And I was like, yeah, let's do that. So they evaluated him, and they just found that he had some kind of learning disability. And it wasn't a specific diagnosis of what kind of learning disability, but that he did have something. And so he qualified under that specific learning disability. So, we know that there's a lot of comorbidities with disabilities that can go together. And so don't throw out just because that's all they have is an ADHD, or maybe they don't even have an ADHD diagnosis, but that's what you think. Okay, next slide. So the IEP team members, there is required team members that need to be part of the decision-making for that student. And it really is a team decision. It's not like the school versus the parent or anything. It should be all together. And so the required members, there's a parent, and they are a required member. And I'm going to talk about the parent on the next slide, because that can mean lots of different things. But the parent is required. And then the student has a star by them, because if they are over 14 and they are talking about transition goals, then they are required to be invited. Now, I think schools, and I wish they would do this better. I think my son was invited. Hey, do you want to come to your special education meeting? And he was like, no way, I am not coming to that. And so they're not forced to come, but they're required to be invited. I wish the school would have said, we're having your IEP meeting on Tuesday at 10:20. It's during English. We'll check you out. If the student refuses, then they refuse. But sometimes just they don't know that they have a choice. I think that is useful, because these kids are really, really need to advocate for themselves. They need to be part of the decision-making process about their future. And because at 14, that's when we're starting to decide classes that are going towards graduation or careers and things like that. So I think it's super important that they come. I talked to one special education teacher. I don't remember, it was in a rural area, and they have, and I know in these bigger, it might not be possible, but they have their kids actually writing their IEP and like what they need, and kind of giving them a guideline of, and helping them write their own IEP. I thought that was great. So, and then a special education teacher obviously is required to be there. A general education teacher is required to be there, because we know that most kids are in general education classroom for most of the time. And so, we can't make decisions and then, then they go to the class and the teacher's like, well, I can't do all this stuff, that's not possible. Or they might be seeing other things that the special education teacher's not seeing or the parent's not seeing. So they're super important to be there. The LEA representative is like the principal or vice principal, whoever's in charge of making the financial decisions. And then related service provider, that could be anyone. So there's 4 required members, and then if they're receiving services like from physical therapy, a PT needs to be there, or a speech therapist needs to be there. That's where a Check and Connect mentor might be there, or a private counselor, foster parent, lots of caseworker. So it could be like a team of 4, it could be a team of 10, that are coming to the meeting while helping that student. Okay, next slide. So the parent is a big question because these kids are in state custody. They are the guardian, but with special education law, that is not allowed. See, the second one says a guardian can be the parent, but not the state. So if you see that a caseworker is acting as the parent in an IEP meeting, that should not be allowed. And we want them to be there, and they can sign the form that they were there, but they should not be signing as the parent. And then the biological adopted parent, those kids still retain their rights. I mean, those parents still retain their rights. And so making sure that they are invited, even if they are living with a foster parent, then they should still be involved. Now, obviously, we know that if rights are terminated or restraining order, there's lots of different scenarios, and we'll kind of talk about that in the next. But and then like a person acting in the place of a parent of a student with whom the student lives. So if they've been living with grandpa and grandma for years and the parents want nothing to do with it, then they are allowed to be the parents in this situation. And then at the bottom, a surrogate parent. So that is someone that has been trained in special education, maybe just a little bit, but they are able to advocate for that student. They might not know that student. And so that's where it's really important to have all these other players there that can advocate for them personally, but they can advocate for them according to with special education things. And so we actually have a list of parents that have signed up to be surrogate parents, and they've done some training, and they are super willing to help. So if you want to contact me, I can send you that list. I probably should have just connected that or, sent that. But anyway, and usually that situation is if they're like in a facility, because a foster parent can be the parent, and that's, when they're living not in a facility, they're usually with a foster parent. Okay, the next slide. Okay, so questions. So what if you can't get a hold of the parent? So the law requires that you make reasonable efforts to contact, and that means calling multiple times, emailing, texting, and documenting all of that. Are they able to reach out to the caseworker or case manager and ask if they know who they are and how to contact them? Kind of questions like, has anyone ever been able to make contact with the parent? And if no, and they're in a facility, then maybe a surrogate parent would be the best choice, because the law does allow for an IEP meeting, not the initial signing up to do special education, but the law does allow there to be a meeting without a parent if you've made reasonable efforts. But if this has been years, then this is not fair to the student. We want these students to have someone advocating for them. And so if it's just maybe like you've been able to get a hold of them in the past and just not this one time, then maybe go ahead and do it without them. But if you've never been able to get a hold of them or not for a long time, then a surrogate parent would probably be the best. If they're living with a foster parent, then the foster parent can be the parent. What if they have a restraining order? So at this point, it's important to contact the caseworker and case manager and talk about the situation. Can this parent attend virtually? Can they, but if that's not a good option and there's no way that they should be involved at all, then kind of just proceed as above. Then the foster parent can be the parent or a surrogate parent. If the parent's rights have been terminated, then they don't have any more education rights, and the foster parent would be it, or maybe a surrogate parent in a facility, or maybe another family member that they've been living with, or maybe a court-appointed guardian. And then, so as someone just said, I thought in the previous slide that the foster parent cannot be the parent. So the foster parent is actually allowed in the law. So DCFS, a caseworker, is not allowed, but a foster parent can be allowed. The foster parent, the biological adoptive parents should be the first parent, but if they are not available, they have a restraining order, it's terminated, whatever, then the foster parent can be it. Now, as an IEP meeting, the foster parent should definitely be invited and be involved because they're working with that child day to day. And so they should be involved, and they would be signed that they were in attendance at the meeting, but they wouldn't sign as the parent if the parent can be involved, because we want these parents to be involved. So, because there's better chance of reunification if the parents are involved. So it's key if they're involved, and the law really is trying to protect the rights of the parents. And so that's why it's important to have them there. If they're living with grandparents, if the grandparents have been taking care of them and the parent doesn't want it to be involved, then the law allows for the grandparents to be the parents. So there's lots of different scenarios. If you're in a situation, I mean, there's lots more scenarios. If you're in a situation, please reach out, because there's a lot of crazy, it's just kind of crazy. Lots of crazy situations that could be happening. So reach out if you have a question about that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we've talked about the referral, the evaluation, the eligibility, and now we're just going to talk about the IEP meeting and the placement. And there's a big percentage of YC kids with disabilities, and most of them have already been identified. So it's important, this is kind of just a different side note, it's important to find out if they have an IEP and if the IEP is being carried out. So we know that transferring records is like a huge problem because these kids are moving around so much, and a lot of times the school records will be transferred, but the IEP won't be transferred because the IEP is actually kept in a different location. So if you request the records, that secretary sending out those records, they might not even go look. So I would say best practice is to always request an IEP, even if you don't know if they have one. Just request an IEP. Because at least they'll go check on that. And they can go through, I don't remember the system now, but you can go look and see if they have had a IEP, and the school is required to keep a record for 3 years. And so if they're able to go back a few schools and see maybe where that IEP has been left, but that's really a big problem. Okay, next slide. So, oh wow, we are out of time. Okay, I am just gonna, let's see, I'm just gonna skip, let's see, I'm just gonna go to transition. If you wanna just skip a few slides to the post-secondary transition IEP, yeah. So this one, we talked about inviting those kids to the IEP, super important. We need to help them get information. We need to help them see what options are out there. If they want to be a chef, help them get into cooking classes and the advanced cooking classes, and to help them try that out. Maybe they took it and they're like, actually, I hate cooking. And so that's a great time for them to learn what they like and what they don't like. CTE is great because it gives them lots of opportunities. And then also give them options for graduation. Are they able to graduate? If not, give them the option for adult education, or helping them sign up for the ACT if they do want to go to college. making sure they have the right credits. And so this is why it's super important for them to be involved and see what they what would be helpful for them. And so that is all. If you want to just go to like the end where it has just my contact information. I knew that this could be a problem, talking too much. Anyway, feel free to reach out anytime, and I can send you information, send you those cards if you want to send out. And then I don't know if there's time for questions or not, Amanda.
So what I would say is I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording to honor our time, but I am willing to hang out for